On May 11th, 4 people were killed and many more injured during an anti-drug trafficking operation run by the Honduran military and the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration. The victims were 2 pregnant women, a child, and a young father. Since then, the DEA has suspended Operation Anvil, but victims continue to search for justice, and human rights groups are pushing the U.S. Congress to investigate. Annie Bird is the co-founder of Rights Action and discusses where the case stands now.
There has been no serious investigation of this massacre, other than those carried out by human rights organizations, and it's very clear that there were innocent bystanders killed by armed security forces under U.S. command, whether they were killed directly by U.S. agents or by Honduran agents under the command of the DEA. Essentially, the State Department and the DEA have had basically no response to the victims and said this is all entirely a problem of the Honduran government, even though it was, and they admit it was, an operation directed by the U.S. DEA. Some members of Congress and the Senate have been interested and responsive and asking some questions of the DEA and the State Department. But, you know, as yet, there's been no compensation to the victims, no one's paid for medical expenses. There are really serious needs that were left with the surviving family and the surviving victims that nobody's responded to. Nobody's paid for any of these operations. Wilmer's had to be carried out in a private hospital. Lucio's was the public hospital, but it was done badly. Hilda's also having to pay huge expenses in terms of travel. And then, you know, the family members of the victims, Candelario Trapp's children have dropped out of school because they can't pay for school, you know, because secondary school in Honduras is paid for by the families. Juana Jackson's sister is struggling to take care of her 2 young children that were left, as is Emerson's, you know, widow. There's also not been any serious examination of the U.S. policies. I mean, if the DEA is going to arm agents and put them in a country with a non-functional justice system, they have to come up with a way of holding, you know, people responsible when bystanders are killed. And it's not, you know, no one could look at the investigation that was carried out by the Honduran Attorney General's office and say that that was in any way a serious investigation of the massacre of 4 people. Often when investigations that look this bad come out, the perception that comes across is that there's a lack of capacity in the Honduran justice system, but actually what I would argue is that it goes beyond that there's a lack of political will to carry out a real investigation. It's not that the Honduran authorities don't know that when an incident like this happens, you should immediately impound the weapons and conduct ballistics testing. It's that there's not a political will to for that to happen. So investigators don't do it because they feel that their jobs could be at risk, that it's not encouraged until, you know, maybe political pressure extends over months and months, and finally they feel the need to do something to cover their tracks. The drug war in Honduras exactly coincides with areas where there's acute conflicts over natural resources, whether that's land, petroleum, rivers for hydroelectric dams, or mines. And that's what the conflict is in Honduras today, more than about drug trafficking. It's about natural resources. There's a lot of land conflicts in Honduras today, essentially because in the 1990s the agrarian reform laws were changed, and basically through violence, illegal title transfers happened. And because people are fighting in the courts to regain their land and beginning to have some success, there's been lawyers who have been killed. Campesino organizations, small farmers who are involved in land conflicts can't find lawyers to defend them because they're all threatened and run off by people with a lot of influence in the government, and apparently enough influence to levy support from the U.S. military. Recently there was a case in which 4 plantations were returned to campesinos after 18 years of struggling to get their land back. And the lawyer defending them from appeals after they had won was murdered because the African palm planters, if they can't beat them in court, they'll kill the lawyers. I mean, essentially, or threaten them or bribe them. And so campesino organizations can no longer obtain lawyers. The U.S. is becoming directly involved in those land conflicts and often using the infrastructure of the drug war to support security forces, which are getting involved in other kinds of conflicts which have nothing to do with the drug war.